Hello and welcome to InFocus with me, Curtis Hinton, on Quews News. This week, Labour confirmed they can't promise to rule out further taxes on the people within their election period. Justin Welby was forced to apologise again for remarks he gave in his farewell speech. And is Starmer stumbling over his words? We're talking about it today with two political journalists, Sophie Corcoran and David Atherton, are joining me. Welcome both to the show.
Thanks for the invite.
We're going to get straight into it. Labour, taxes, they can't promise there won't be more taxes before the next election. I mean, they promised not to put taxes up on working people back in June. They did. The Chancellor turned around and said there wasn't going to be any more taxes. There now might be more taxes. Expected, unexpected, Sophie?
Pretty expected. I think if you're giving massive public sector pay rises or you're spending the amount that they're spending in foreign aid, the only way you're going to pay for that is through tax. I don't think anybody should have really believed Labour at the last election. Growing up, my parents always taught me that you should never trust Labour, and this is my first experience really under a Labour government because obviously I'm quite young, so most of my life have been under a Conservative government, and within 2 months, my parents were right.
David, not to draw attention to the age difference, but this is your first experience with Labour.
Well, indeed, yes. Funny enough, the thought went straight through my head. I have lived through loads of Labour governments. I suppose I'm 64, and I don't look a day over 80. I know, and I remember the Callaghan administration in the late 1970s when we had the winter of discontent in 1978. Sort of the people who dug up the graves went on strike, and there were bodies unburied for months. There were literally piles of rubbish in the streets. Leicester Square, the whole of Leicester Square had rubbish piled. You couldn't see any of the grass. You couldn't see anything that was going there. We were a declining, appalling country at the time, and we were the sick man of Europe. And I think the Wall Street Journal said, "By Britain, it's been nice knowing you." And then Baroness Thatcher came into power, and then we started to move towards more brighter, sunlit uplands. Every single Labour government I can remember has made a complete hash of the economy. They've increased unemployment. Businesses have collapsed, and there's a massive debt at the end of it. Saying that though, Conservatives weren't that much better, in their 14 years in power, and I think they inherited a debt of 1.5 trillion, and it's now heading towards 3 trillion at the moment. I think every person in this country owes something like £70,000 per person. To my mind, that's a major security issue as well. Yeah. And Labour will just make it even worse.
Well, I mean, they initially said there was a £22 billion black hole, which caused them to tax $40 billion. Not sure on the maths on that one. But Sir Keir Starmer has said that he can't rule out further taxes before the next election in case of something like COVID-19 or another war breaks out. I mean, we are talking high-level things here. We are talking global pandemics or war. So anything less than that surely can be questioned by the opposition.
Absolutely. Well, never say never, as far as I can say. Obviously, as a politician, you can never say never to tax rises or any other policy. But I mean, the whole point about the Labour Party, they've been in power 4 or 5 months now. The whole manifesto was a tissue of lies. And I can see unemployment getting up to maybe 2 million, maybe something like that. I can see a massive spending debt, on an annual basis. And apparently, look at the bond markets. People aren't very happy to lend any money to Britain. And if we do have a genuine pandemic like COVID again, or any other security issue like that, this country could be in major problems. And believe you me, if we ever default on our debt, if we ever default on it, there will be anarchy in the streets. There will be riots. Shops will be looted and things like that. The Conservative Party. People call it austerity. I'd call it balancing the books. What the Conservative Party should have done when they had that major when they had their major majority. What they should have done after, post Brexit, they should have slashed civil service numbers. They should slash whole departments. For example, Ofcom. What's the point of them? They just employ 300 people to police the internet and look around for naughty tweets and naughty Facebook posts. What we should have done, and what the Conservative Party should have done, is what Javier Milei's doing in Argentina, a classical liberal, and he's slashing everything left, right, and centre. And believe it or not, for the first time since 2012, they've got a balanced budget. Well done. That's how you do it.
Sophie, Rachel Reid said that after this budget, this budget was to rectify what the Conservatives has done. So now, if they need to borrow more, is it Labour's fault? Are they going to take the blame for it?
Well, yeah, and I also think Labour needs to take some of the fault for what they inherited, because we forget the fact that a large part of the debt that they inherited did come through lockdown and come through COVID. And whilst I was against lockdown, I don't think the Conservatives should have locked down as much as they could have done. We forget that the biggest champions of lockdown were the Labour Party. So the reason why we've inherited... Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason why we've inherited such a debt is because we had this lockdown, which I thought went on longer than what it should have done, and it could have been even worse if Labour had gotten their way. And for a reasonable amount of time, they did get their way, purely because governments were scared of making the wrong decision and being blamed for hundreds of thousands, if not more, death. So I think that they do have to take a fair share of the responsibility for the financial burden that the country is coming to, and they also knew what they were getting themselves into. There's no way that you've had 14 years of government, 14 years to prepare yourself to have a government, and then having to do a complete reset within just 5-6 months. That just shows how inept they are. They've had 14 years to get themselves together. They knew that they were going to come in. The polls were very clear. There was no doubt at all that from at least the last 2 years that we were going to get a Labour government from this election. So they've had time to prepare. And they went out with a manifesto based on pure lies, which they knew were pure lies, and they tried to turn around and say, oh, we didn't expect this, or we didn't know what's happening. Nonsense. You had 14 years to prepare.
Do you think people are genuinely fed up, or just fed up with the current times? Are they fed up with the Labour Party or politics as a whole at the moment in this country?
I think young people are fed up with politics as a whole in this country, and I don't think you can blame us. And I think we've seen a trend nationally, especially for young people, that young people are actually going more to the right. For example, in the USA, in Germany, in France, young people are starting to join these sorts of parties a little bit like Reform, because we've had enough. Like, I saw a thing on the news this morning saying that MI5 and GCHQ, I think it was, are only offering internships to people of colour. We've got mass immigration that's taken away housing from young people. We can't get jobs because either they're hiking up the taxes, as David says, so now unemployment is going to be sky high because businesses don't want to employ young people like ourselves who are just looking for experience, because there's no point. We want the experience, but businesses aren't willing to pay for that because the taxes are too high. So that comes to the detriment of not only our lives now, but also our future development and our ability to survive in this country long term, because eventually we're not going to have the skills to match those globally, because we're not being given the chance to do so, because businesses aren't prepared to take that chance with us because the taxes are too high, or we can't get internships and gain experience because businesses are too worried about DEI and all of this nonsense. So young people are being pushed out of their own country. We're not being given the experience. We're not being given the ability to gain skills because of this woke leftist nonsense, which is why they're all coming to the right. But I think even that, people are just fed up. Young people are fed up, and I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. I've always been on my own in politics in terms of being onto the right, but it's changed now, and it's changed massively, and there's no surprise. We're just fed up.
David, you would have seen a lot more governments come and go. In terms of debt, Rishi Sunak had a plan to bring down national debt, and he thought that we should pay it back now so our children's children didn't have to pay it back in the future. Labour have kind of reversed that within the space of 5 months, borrowing a lot more and probably needing to borrow a lot more over the course of the next 4.5 years if they make it that long. Have you seen the effects of passing on debt?
Yes, I think I can't remember the exact figure. I think it's like £60 billion a year. It might even be more than that, maybe even 100 billion. That's what we pay in interest alone. That could be 100 billion we could spend on services, or more importantly, tax cuts. There's your 22 billion pound, 22.6 billion pound black hole fixed already. You compare, for example, Singapore to Britain. It's got a population of 9 million. And they don't. The government not only has no debt, it's got $1.72 billion in a fund, in a sovereign wealth fund. The taxes they collect, they actually save for a rainy day. We spend something like 47% of our GDP, on government services and related business. During the pandemic, Singapore got up to a disastrous 18% of GDP during the COVID pandemic. A figure that's stuck in my head. And they're 50% better off than us. They earn 50% more per person than they do in Britain, and they live 3 years longer than us. Socialism, frankly, socialism kills. If you look at it from that angle, and this is sort of the mindset. This is the mindset that we have. The people call the swamp and the blob and things like that. This is the mindset that people in government have. These things can't be fixed. When Margaret Thatcher came into power in 1979, as I briefly alluded to it, the tax take from all taxation was £80 billion a year. And now we're spending, I think it's £1.2 trillion a year. That's a factor of more than about 15 times the government's spending. What are we getting for our money? Probably nothing. Oh, and by the way, if I can pay tribute to Liz Truss for having the right idea, and by the way, she was stitched up by her own people. That's the reason she left. I'll save the story for another day. But when Margaret Thatcher came to power, say 80 billion was a tax take of the government. By the time she left government in 1990, with her tax cutting agenda and red tape cutting agenda, it had nearly tripled to £200 billion a year that Britain was getting in taxes. You cannot tax your way to prosperity.
It's a tough one to go through. I mean, I want to go back to your point earlier, David, when you said about cutting services like Ofcom and that sort of stuff. America at the moment are turning to that. We've got the Department of Government Efficiency. I think we all know what that is. We're cutting jobs and we're saving money where we don't need to spend it. Is that a temporary arm in government for America, do you think? Or is that something that we could see implemented over here in the next 10, 15 years?
Well, indeed. I think one of the other reasons younger people are so referred to about young people turning to the right, on Twitter, on X, they could learn the truth for themselves. And I think, when Elon Musk first took over X, he slashed 80% of his staff. And in my opinion, since he's taken over, it's much improved. I think it's a great product. And also I feel a lot happier about having some free speech and being able to access information these days. So what I think will happen if Elon and Vivek take over for government efficiency, I should imagine that could well become a template for the rest of the world. Oh, look at us! We reversed our deficit, we reversed our debt. We've been able to reduce taxes. Why is reducing taxes seem to be far right? I'm sure nobody in this country, if the services are maintained or we've got the money to pay for them, why would anybody object to more money in their pockets?
And I think also, Sophie, when it comes to taxes, we're taxing farmers, £500 million, but then we're giving £500 million in foreign aid to foreign farmers. I think there's a bit of a catch-22 with it. I mean, if there's tax and it's going to things like the National Health Service, which is actually going to work, or into policing, into courts to get actual criminals brought to justice, but it's not. It's going to foreign aid. British pounds are going to foreign aid. Doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. No, because the farmers' inheritance tax, as I've made pretty clear, I don't believe is about raising money at all. There's absolutely no justification for it to be, because the amount of money that we're raising in the farmers' inheritance tax is being sent abroad in foreign aid. It's actually about disadvantaging British industry. And it shouldn't come as any surprise that the Prime Minister that said that he preferred Davos to his own country is implementing these measures. We do not have a taxation problem in Britain. There is absolutely no justification to say that Britain is not highly taxed. We have the highest tax burden, and admittedly under the Conservative government, previous to this government inheriting it, in 70 years. Britain does not have an under-taxation problem. We have an overspending problem, we have a wastage problem, and we have a problem with governments that don't want to see our own country succeed. There is no reason to be sending money abroad to foreign farmers when we service our own industry. But it's not about making money, it's about putting Britain on the back foot in order to make themselves feel more comfortable, more at home when they go gallivanting into these global conferences.
And I think you're not the only one who sees it like that at the moment, because 2/3 of Britons are feeling worse off because of this government. Labour's election win obviously was only 33.7% of the vote share, one of the lowest starting points at any government, with the largest majority. And Nigel Farage, who has just got himself and 4 more MPs, is now the most popular party leader. Someone who wants to invest back into Britain, publicly has come out and said that. Wasn't so, I mean, recently he's been more focused on the immigration figures coming out, obviously on the Conservatives and Labour side of things. Why are people turning to Reform then? Are they, because Reform are a political party. Nigel Farage has been a politician for the best part of the last few decades at least. So why are people switching to Reform? Are they not seen as a political party?
Is that for me or
either one of you? Yeah, David.
Oh, okay. Right, okay, fine. Well, there are three major issues in Britain at the moment: immigration, immigration, and immigration. You can trace much of our problems down to the mass immigration of the last 5 years, and started under Tony Blair in 1997. First of all, I don't know whether you know, you've got to earn £38,700 a year to pay your way. So if you earn less than that, you absorb more services from the state than you actually pay into. And of course, all these work visas that these people are getting, from India, Pakistan, and elsewhere in the world, to work in shops and bars. But lovely people. There's a couple of Indian guys who work at my local. It's a hotel and it's a bar as well. Lovely people. We enjoy going in there and having a chat with them. But the point is, we have now seven consecutive quarters of a reduction in our GDP per head. These people are making us poorer. Then, of course, there's the 5.4 billion cost of the Channel migrants being put up in hotels. I don't know whether you know, but Michael Gove, when he was Levelling Up Secretary, has allocated £500 million to build homes for Ukrainians and Afghans in this country. No Brits need to apply. And also Angela Rayner has also changed the rules where British people don't get priority over foreign people for social housing in this country. The main reason property prices are so high, and you can't, young people can't buy a house, but they can't rent. They can't even rent. There's plenty of 30-year-olds still living at home with their parents. Is simply because of the high cost of housing. And also the red tape that goes with it. Just a very quick Javier Milei point on classical liberalism. He got rid of all the red tape on renting property in Argentina, and there was a 226% increase in property coming available to rent to the market. It was matched with a 40% decrease in rentals as well, the price of renting. So we are shooting ourselves in our foot left, right, and centre. And quite frankly, from what I can see, Nigel Farage and his party are the only people who probably have answers to our questions and our problems.
I mean, I want to talk about the conversation mainly is on tax. So Labour have said that the reason why they are taxing, the focuses are the plan for change. Obviously, we did a reset again this week, focusing on improving living standards, building homes and investing in infrastructure such as the NHS. Obviously, we are seeing some of that being done. Things that the Conservatives were also planning to do without all of these taxes, and with the supposed £22 billion black hole. They're not explaining why they needed to tax so much, except from we had a £22 billion black hole, which the Conservatives still refute to this day that isn't there. Sophie, what's the future looking like if say, for example, we'll get onto later a discussion about whether Conservatives and Reform voters need to come to some sort of togetherness to get Labour off at the next election, to remove them from power. But what's the future like if Labour do win a second term? We are looking at 10 years, a decade of heavy taxing like this. What's the future looking like?
Well, I think the future for young people is pretty much how we're feeling now. We don't feel like we have any future in Britain. We talk about house building. You know, Angela Rayner said that they're going to build 1.5 million homes in the next 4 years. A statistic was being they'd have to build something like 900 homes every single day. They're not going to do that. But even if they were, if we use the net migration statistics as they are, then we're looking at about 2.5 million people coming into the country by that time. So we're still going to have a 1 million home deficit, even if they do build these magic 1.5 million homes to fill a deficit that we already have. It's not possible. And, you know, we're going to have businesses not wanting to invest in Britain, something that we desperately need, which is why I was so against him not inviting Elon Musk to the investment summit. I mean, why would you not do that? Britain needs investment. You have to be mature and put your own, you know, petty politics aside and think this is a country that is in desperate need of investment. Young people, again, are going to be low skilled. A lot of us are probably going to be relying on the welfare state purely because we don't get the opportunities to get meaningful and paid work, because no one's going to want to employ young people in Britain that are unemployed, that are unexperienced. What they're going to do is they're just going to go get foreign workers abroad. Young people are going to become less internationally competitive. So we're going to be much poorer than our parents' generation, unable to buy homes, unable to get jobs. Britain is going to have a lack of investment, and all of it is a political choice. There's no reason for this to happen in Britain. Britain's got a remarkable amount of potential. The people in Britain have a remarkable amount of potential. I mean, look at us young people. A statistic came out the other day that said Britons are actually in the top 5 nationally for their education. Yet how many of us are going to be able to get well-paying jobs if there are no jobs to get? So our potential in this country is being wasted. A lot of people will go abroad. And Britain is going to become back what it was, you know, the winter of discontent. And all it takes is one politician like Margaret Thatcher to turn it around. It can be done. We've seen it in Argentina. We saw it with Margaret Thatcher. All it takes is one person with the right ideas to turn it around. But unfortunately, we just don't have that in Britain.
Is Kemi, so Kemi Badenoch is not that person?
I backed Kemi for the leadership, but I think she's kind of been a bit quiet at the moment. I know that they're trying to renew the party, and I will sit back and say that yes, renewing the party does take time, but I'm just not seeing the energy at the moment. I'm getting really frustrated because I'm like, this is one of the worst, this is certainly the worst government I've ever lived through, and I know, granted, I haven't lived through that many, but there is so, why are you disappearing? You know, why are we not taking the fight to them? Where's the energy? I feel like people have just given up and said that this is the status quo and this is how it's always going to be, and that's not the case. Again, look at Argentina. You can, people always felt that Argentina was doomed, but you can turn it around, and you can turn it around dramatically. It just takes someone who's brave, but for some reason, you know, the establishment in Britain has just accepted that this is the way it's going to be.
We do need to move on to the next topic. But before we go, David, I want to ask, Sophie had a very good point there. The Conservative Party, the narrative at the moment is it's a revive. It's a change-up with the same people, though. Kemi, part of the last government, Priti Patel, part of the last government. There's not much change that's going on, except from the person at the top, which was done twice after Boris, now 3 times with Kemi. Is it a different party, the Conservative Party, or is it the same just with a new...
No, I think... I think the king is dead, long live the king at the moment. You know, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Funny enough, I was out and about in Westminster, and I bumped into somebody who'd worked for Kemi Badenoch for some time. And I said, do you think we'll see, a fresh page being turned? Do you think that she'll put the last 14 years behind her, until we're all behind us, and be the right person? And he said no, and the guy worked for her. So it just looks like it's going to be, the same. If the Conservatives get back into power, it's going to be exactly the same mush that we had for 14 years under the other, Conservative Party. I'm a natural Conservative voter, and in 1997, when they'd been in power for 13, 14 years at the time, I just passively abstained in the 1997 election. In 2024, I was fire and brimstone. They have to go. That's a difference in attitude between the two times. And of course, our penance is the Labour Party. And let's make one very brief point on the Labour Party. The Labour Party won't, in a month of Sundays, ever get re-elected or re-elected in 5 years' time. In fact, I think they are going to bring so much disaster to this country. I think you could see the Labour Party disappearing, and we go back to the 19th century when there were the Whigs and they were a Conservative Party, and maybe with a lot of Reform people as well. No, I'm sorry. I can see Keir Starmer being sacked inside a year, and I can see the end of the Labour Party too.
Well, I want to get on to Sir Keir Starmer shortly, but before that, we're going to move on topic. Justin Welby back in the headlines again this week. Had to resign, or felt he had to resign following the John Smith scandal, abuse scandal. He doesn't officially leave his role until the 6th of January, but Thursday just gone, he gave his final farewell to the House. In doing so, he joked about pity for his diary secretary, who now has no work, and suggested that a head had to roll, which was his. Someone had to take the blame, and it was him. Abuse survivors and clergies have called the remarks frivolous and tone deaf, failing to acknowledge the gravity of the Church of England's safeguarding failures. He's come out and apologised. We'll go for the apology in a moment. But was it a bit of bitterness in his statement, in his apology? Or in his farewell? Sorry, not his apology, in his farewell?
Yeah, of course. I think he's saying that, I'm the one who's had to take the fall. This is not my fault, but I'm the one that's had to take the fall. That's the sort of impression I got for it. But ultimately, he said heads have to roll and someone is to blame. And it's you that's to blame, Justin Welby, and that's the reason why you've gone. It's common sense. He is to blame.
Yeah.
And heads had to roll and someone had to be blamed, and the person who got blamed and whose head had to roll is the person who is responsible, in my view.
Well, the report came out and said that Welby had the opportunity to report him back in 2013. We're talking 11 years ago. And he didn't. So that's a fundamental failure. David, it's in such a big responsibility, he has no real option but to leave.
Well, I'm surprised he wasn't defrocked and sacked for what he'd done. None of this nicey resign. No, it's a case of, here's your P45, out you go. No, here's a black plastic bag, clear your desk now, you're fired. Really, he basically conspired to cover up the mass sexual abuse of young boys. One of my followers on X, he was actually at one of his places, one of his camps he ran for boys, and he'd walk around the shower naked, as the boys were taking a shower as well. And there was always one or two he used to pick out for special attention, shall we say. This guy, John Smith was an evil man, and the fact that Wokeby, or as we call him, Justin Welby, was completely failed to do his duty, even as a private citizen, let alone as the head of the Church of England. He really should. He's got away with this far too lightly, and the lack of shame, the lack of remorse, and and I'm right and you're wrong attitude, and whataboutery and things like that. He's a national disgrace. And I read that six archbishops criticised him for his speech, and quite rightly too. He needs to go into obscurity and forgotten, and he should be punished, for what he'd done.
I mean, there was no remorse from him at all. Yeah. I know it's easy to come out with an apology, but to say what he'd done, and it wasn't like he had to resign 24 hours before. There's been a significant period of time since he resigned, and he had time to write that speech and rewrite it, and he still came up with that. We'll go through the speech in a moment, but as you said, reverends have come out. Reverend Richard Bastable has criticised the speech, showing no pity for church victims for abuse, and label it how it's not how to communicate. The actual statement read, I've got it in front of me here. Yesterday, I gave my farewell speech to the House of Lords as part of a debate on housing and homelessness. I'd like to apologise wholeheartedly for the hurt that this speech may have caused. I understand that my words, the things that I said, and those I admitted to say have caused further distress for those who were traumatised and continue to be harmed by John Smith's heinous abuse. and by the far-reaching efforts of the other perpetrators of abuse. I did not intend to overlook the experience of survivors or make light of the situation, and I'm very sorry for having done so. I mean, it's very, very formal. There's no heart in it. And for someone who's meant to be a man of the cloth, a representative of the highest point of the Church of England, he's not really shown any compassion, no empathy, and no remorse. Sophie, should he be able to stay within the Church of England in any level or not?
No, he wasn't even a good Christian. I mean, he hardly, represented the teachings of the church. And the reason why, I have a little bit of a conspiracy, that Justin Welby has gone so woke and basically defaced the meaning of Christianity and the church while he was the Church of England is because he knows that when you go woke, the establishment tend to protect you. Look what happened with Hugh Edwards. He knew that if he banged to the drum that the establishment wanted to hear, then he would get away with things like this and not doing the right thing and not taking safeguarding seriously, and that the establishment would protect him, and that they did protect him for a very, very long time. There's no way that he should have gotten away with this for as long as he had done. The only reason why he did is because he was saying all of the right things, and he knew that. I don't think he actually believed for a second a lot of the things that he trotted out in the Church of England. I don't think he does. I really don't think he does. And I think he just did it because he knew that this is what people wanted to hear. And if I tell the establishment what they want to hear, they'll protect me when I'm doing things wrong. And they did for a long time.
David, do you think religion's got a place in politics? Because Justin Welby got involved in quite a lot. He got involved with the Rwanda asylum plan. He said he didn't like that. He spoke out against payday lending. He spoke in the House on Foreign Policy, immigration, housing, so much.
Right, indeed. Well, funnily enough, I'm on my notes here. I've got Pakistan and Nigeria. He never got. There are social issues. But I don't think he should be involved. Things like Rwanda and what have you. He shouldn't have been involved in that. Yeah. That's a democratic decision of the government and by the electorate. What really annoyed me about Welby most of all was there are Christians being persecuted all around the world at the moment, in the Middle East, in Pakistan, in Nigeria. We're talking about ethnic cleansing in some cases. Also you look at the Hindu situation, in Bangladesh at the moment. When you need leadership and spiritual leadership, and you're not even prepared to look after your own flock in that situation. Welby was an absolute disgrace. He really could have got people on side. If he got out and championed causes like that. For example, at the moment, radical Islam, is something that features in the UK at the moment. Here was his opportunity to reach out to Christians and ex-Muslims and other similar moderate people, and get those attendances up in churches, have more interest in Christianity. Full stop. To my mind, to me, Christianity is about forgiveness, and maybe we should be a little bit more Christian towards Welby and forgive him. It's about turning the other cheek and things like that. The positive, the cultural side of Christianity. He could have filled up the pews. He could have gained so much more interest in the Church of England, and we would have become a less of a godless country. They are just absolute wet drips. Saying that Welby wasn't alone. Like people like Rowan Williams when he was Archbishop. He was another sort of person who got reported regularly. When he commented on social issues. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear about why I should be going to church on a Sunday. Why I should be involved in a parish, and how are you going to protect me and your other fellow Christians around the world and people of other faiths that are being. For example, in Myanmar, the Muslims are being attacked, in Myanmar. This is the kind of religious leadership that we need in the world, and he didn't offer it in one small iota.
Was it a way for him to get fame, do you think? Do you reckon that's what it was? Fame, power?
I just think he lives in a sort of an ivory tower, in Lambeth Palace, the world passes him by. He's typical of a lot of upper middle class people in this country. I've always think that if you're upper middle class or part of the establishment, before you take any power, Whether you're a journalist, anybody, you have to go and live in a council house for 6 months and find out what life is really like. And the only thing you're allowed to take with you is a baseball bat and a hammer or something like that. No special protection. No,
You saying that's what's needed to survive on a council estate at the moment in Labour Britain?
Well, I lived in Hackney for 30 years, and I had a mortgage there, and even I used to have a baseball bat. Well, not I had a hammer underneath the bed actually, because that is what life that is what it's like. And let me repeat that. The majority of people in Hackney are lovely people, but there was always that small element you were frightened of. You had to be aware of. And
every area's got that, though, right? Every area. And like you say, it's being able to be compassionate and to be able to sympathise and to be able to talk about the experience they're going through.
Yeah, sure.
Some of the clergy labelled him as the worst Archbishop of modern times. The talk now is who is next, because the next Archbishop could be the one who potentially coronates the future King and Queen of England. Who is next? It's a big role to take on, and they can't make the same mistakes again. It can't be anyone surely involved in the last decade and a half, knowing anything about what's happened. In my opinion, there probably should be more people than Justin to go. I think his bitterness might come from the fact he's the only one so far. His head's rolled.
Sure.
There probably will be more. But the next person has to be someone complete. It's almost like the Conservative Party. To reform something, you need new from the ground up. But are we going to get that at the Archbishop level?
That I very much doubt. In fact, maybe the Church of England, should maybe appoint somebody who isn't ordained. Maybe someone who isn't a vicar or a bishop or whatever. Go for somebody completely secular who believes in God. That would be a good start as well. I don't know. And start afresh and be a little bit more realistic in what causes you support and what causes you don't support, sort of thing. So I genuinely don't have a clue who could be next. Really don't. Not that I really care to a certain extent, because all the archbishops have been so awful in my living memory.
I want to move now on to the final topic. Sophie, this week, Sir Keir Starmer's terminology has been a bit under microscope, under scrutiny, being compared to Trump-like terminology using the term swamp. Obviously, Trump in his first term, Trump 1.0 as they call him, said he would drain the swamp when he goes in. Kemi Badenoch has criticised him for mocking her about working at McDonald's, saying that if it was a Conservative who said it, it would be classed as racist. What's wrong with... Is he just trying to become likeable?
Well, I think what Kemi said, is actually nonsense. I don't think you're ever going to be accused of, being called racist for making fun of someone working at McDonald's. Is it a little bit, I think that we should be making fun of people who have worked at McDonald's and KFC? No, I did it. It was one of the best jobs I've ever had. And I was very grateful. And when I got that job at 16, it kind of transformed me from being some girl from Thurrock who had absolutely no ambition to somebody who genuinely wanted to make my life better and to work hard. And I think it had such a positive impact. However, I don't think it was racist. I don't know really why Kemi was going down that angle. I think he's trying to make himself likeable. I think he's aware that the public dislikes him. And I also think he's very aware that there is a reason why Nigel Farage is as successful as he is. And it's because he has charisma. It's because he has a personality. It's because he attracts people. People aren't attracted to Nigel Farage because of his politics. People are attracted to him because of his personality. And it's the exact same reason why Boris Johnson was so successful. Because people feel like these guys are entertaining. Like, Keir Starmer's is so incredibly boring. And that was kind of my fears a little bit about Kemi Badenoch as well. She's somebody who I think at times does struggle to speak to people that aren't as intelligent as her, and unfortunately for her that is 90% of the country, because she's an extraordinarily intelligent woman. But that doesn't make for a good politician. I think Keir Starmer is aware of what makes Nigel Farage so successful, what makes somebody like Lee Anderson so successful. It's because the way that they carry themselves, it's because of their personality, it's because of who they are, and he just doesn't have that. He knows his brand, so he's trying to counteract that.
But do you think now, well, you said Nigel Farage is not necessarily the politics, but more young people are favouriting, like you said earlier in the programme, to the right side anyway. David, Badenoch argued that the left uses ethnic minorities as a tool to fight against the right. Do you see that?
So we're talking about divide and rule, aren't we? Basically, again, yeah. Well, from my own personal experience, the people who really have race relations and interactions with race, with people in different cultures and races, is the rise of the classical liberals. You know, I went to a demonstration the other day with a load of friends. There's one person of Egyptian heritage, Jamaican, and Afghanistan. Anyway, so we seem to be very much more relaxed about it. Now, if he's going to play the ethnic minority, division of ethnic minorities, that's a very dangerous game because there'll be a backlash against it, and and people can be quite horrible, when they want to be. So, for example, there was a big splash about Islamophobia Awareness Month in November, and the amount of stick that the Muslims in this country got. Some of it was correct, maybe some of it was a bit nasty and a bit racist. But they put themselves on a pedestal. They come out fighting, and they basically got shut down. I saw posts talking about terrorism, grooming gangs. Yeah. These Islamophobic people were quoting some of the more richer verses of the Quran, like 434, 424. And it really is a bad idea. I think also as well. I think I say the right. I always think the right and the classical liberals are more comfortable in ethnic minority company. I think they've also spotted as well is there's a lot of Indians are natural conservative voters. Indians are natural conservative right voters. You look how many sort of Asian candidates Reform had at the last election. There are quite a few. It's obviously run by Zia, whose heritage is Pakistani, and Muslim, I believe. So, I think one of the reasons he wants to do that is because he knows there's a lot of ethnic minority people who are now tempted to move towards the Conservative Party and or the Reform Party, and I think particularly the Reform Party.
Well, we saw it. Sorry to interrupt there. We saw it in America when more Muslims voted this time for Donald Trump. He had Muslims on the stage with him, even though that one of his policies was banning the five in travelling in from the top 5 Muslim-based countries. So essentially putting in policies which could affect them, family potentially, or future Muslims moving to the USA. But he still had their support.
Indeed, well, that's a bit of a strange one. I think one of the reasons for that is that Muslims throughout the world are offended by LGBT propaganda in schools. And frankly, I agree with the Muslims on this. 8-year-olds, don't need to learn about things like transgender women and men. They haven't gone through puberty. They don't need to understand about homosexuality. Maybe when they become 11, 12, 13, and they start going through puberty, maybe there's a place for it. But the point is that a lot of stuff that comes out in Britain, from Stonewall, what have you, it comes across even as being grooming of young children. It's pretty disgusting stuff. So I think there's I've got it's not Dearborn. I think it's called Young Chuck, something like it's in the state of Michigan. It's a suburb of Detroit, where the only flags that they can fly there, the only flag they fly there is the American flag. They've actually banned the LGBT flag there as well. So I presume that was because the Republicans are more small c conservative. I would guess that is the reason why they were looking to the Republican Party for the future.
Aligning more with their values when it comes to everyday life. So just to go back to Starmer, using the term reform, using the term swamp, Trumpian language, do you think it's a likability thing, or do you think it's just him, I don't know, copying Trump?
I don't think he's copying Trump. I just think he's trying to empathise with the general public, and he's failing very badly at it. I think the loathing of his government probably came as a shock to him. Because the Conservative Party on the mainstream media was always under scrutiny, and the Labour Party never was. And so he thought, once I become Prime Minister, people are going to love me for it, no matter what I do, no matter what I say. And I think he's obviously had a major wake-up call. And his advisors have probably said, well, look, this is the mood of the country. This is how you improve your popularity or stop it going further down the toilet. It's obviously backfired. He's got the charisma of a damn rag. So, bye, Keir. Mark my words, you might have heard it here first. I think he'll be gone inside a year.
Is it time to get the lettuce out yet, or give him a couple of months?
Well, see,
I think we get it out.
When you talk about charisma, the last point on it there, I mean, him doing the Downing Street tree switch on just really spoke.
Oh my God.
5 months, didn't it? It wasn't the most charismatic, entertaining moment for politics. Just before I let you go, Elon Musk is reported to be donating around about $100 million, which is 78 million pounds to Reform. Nigel Farage, when asked about it, said it's pure speculation, it's complete news to him, and he's heard nothing of the kind. Is it international election interference if Elon does or not?
Frankly, I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. I have to look at this point of view. If Jeff Bezos, for example, he owns the Washington Times and as well as Amazon, of course. He gave the Labour Party $100 million and laundered it through, his Amazon UK account, shall we say. I would object to that. And I think $100 million is far too much money. I've got to play my straight bat here and say I think it's wrong, and I don't think he should accept the money.
Sophie, do you think it's worse because he's now part of this US new or impending, encumbering US government?
I'm going to be honest. I don't even think we should entertain it because I think it's strictly not true. Something is going on with Reform in terms of these stories are being briefed to the press. There's frankly no truth to it. There's no way that Elon Musk is going to donate this money to Reform. It's not going to happen. In the same way that apparently Robert Jenrick was rumoured to be defecting to Reform, he outlined this week that is frankly false. And a lot of the times there's these stories that are being spread in the mainstream media about Reform. I actually think genuinely to discredit Reform. They're trying to discredit Reform by pushing these stories out that everybody knows are frankly not true, that haven't come from Reform spokespeople, and they're being pushed out to the media that they're simply just not true, and they're doing it to try and discredit Reform and make them seem untrustworthy by pushing out these stories that probably Reform, as you said, Nigel Farage has simply no idea about it. It's coming from someone else, and they're not true.
I mean, he donated 75 million to Trump, so I mean, the idea of him donating more to a foreign party, which at the moment Nigel said on Question Time this week that Elon's got a strong interest in UK politics, but obviously this whole idea of him donating to his party is completely nothing he knows about. Why does he want to get involved with UK politics, do you think? Do you think he sees a future for his companies over here, or do you think he just sees what is going on in America and almost as a carbon copy as currently what's going on in the UK in terms of the current leadership, or he's just not a fan of Sir Keir Starmer? I mean, there's no denying they don't get on.
Well, I think Elon Musk he's like Donald Trump. He's an Anglophile, and I think he's obviously I think he's partly of British South African heritage as well, and also as well, Britain. A lot of thinking Americans appreciate what Britain did for America when we founded it back in the early 17th century. I think 1607. I think when the Brits first arrived there, and I appreciate. I was on another show, a Canadian show, and we spent an hour discussing 1215 Magna Carta and the 1688-89 Bill of Rights Act, and the great glorious tradition of free speech and liberty, and the Enlightenment from the late 17th century. Britain is the modern home of liberalism, the classical liberalism, and I think America admires us for that, and I think Elon Musk particularly sees the way that people have put out some iffy, dodgy social media posts, like Wayne O'Rourke was jailed for 3 years. Despite how he cared for his partner on a full-time basis, and what he said was it was marginal, but it was just a tweet. No, it's like when Bernie Sofoff, was whisked away, for a deleted tweet, based on inaccurate information. Now, this is disgusting, and the way that he had these 24/7 courts set up to basically jail anybody who was involved in the riots. The worst one being Cameron Bell, I think her name is. All she did was live stream TikTok. Not the riots, not the demonstrators. It was demonstrators coming back from the protest. She was standing in the street and just filming people live on TikTok. The demonstrators. And she got 9 months. She was in prison for that one. And I think this is the reason that Elon Musk, is taking so much interest. Here's an anecdote for you. Here's one fact about the 1668 Bill of Rights, which most people don't know about. And one of the things in the American Constitution is famous for is the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. In the 1688-89 Constitution, there is a right to bear arms clause in there. Not a lot of people know that.
And that was before...
Yeah. I think the Constitution was written in 1780. I think it came out of Pennsylvania. So I think it was 1756 they declared independence, and the Bill of Rights was 1689. So nearly virtually 100 years beforehand.
One final question for you both. Just on the Elon Musk talk. Elon Musk's father, Errol, was on GB News. He suggested his son, whose grandmother is British, could take up UK citizenship. If he does, and then he donates, is that foreign interference? Sophie?
No, I wouldn't say it is. If he comes in, I'd very happily welcome Elon Musk into our political sphere. However, people need to realise that there is obviously spending limits for political parties. So you can donate £100 million to reform all you like. Well, unfortunately, they still have to abide by the election expense rules. So I don't think it's going to make as much of a difference as potentially as it would in America. America is all about raise as much money as you can, spend as much money as you can, and that's really what determines whether they win or lose an election. In Britain, there are obviously spending rules, so they can't do that. But it would be helpful for reform to have employed staff and things like that. That political parties that have a lot of members of parliament obviously get employed staff through IPSA and through Parliament, and they're not allowed to campaign. The IPSA paid staff are not allowed to campaign, but most of the time they actually do. So they are given a huge advantage in comparison to what parties like Reform or parties with fewer MPs do have. So I think that funding will make a big difference for them to have internal party staff and campaign staff and people running campaigns. But logistically, it's actually not going to make a difference in terms of what they're allowed to spend per election.
David, do you think it's a welcomed? Would you welcome it to reform?
It's my British sense of fair play here. I think Elon might be putting his thumb on the scales on this one. Maybe a more reasonable amount of money, maybe £1 million, couple of £1 million, something like that. As I say, as Sophie rightly says, employ some full-time staff. Presumably there must be loads of volunteers of people who could give up their free time for nothing for them. And of course, you can employ some professional people, for the party. That's all well and good. But if it was the other way round, I'd be bitching and moaning. So I feel uncomfortable about it. But if he does get the money, I won't be criticising him too loudly.
Well, David and Sophie, thank you so much for joining me on the programme today. Your insights, I'm sure people are going to be finding them incredibly useful, incredibly interesting, and you share the same views a lot of what the nation has at the moment. So to have people like you on the programme, it's an honour, firstly, and secondly, for the people watching, I'm sure it's a delight to have voices like yourselves talking on their behalf.
Thanks for the invite, and hopefully we can do this again.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Well, that was the programme today. Again, another week in politics. There's always so much to talk about. The conversation could have gone on and on and on. Thank you both to David and Sophie for joining me. It was an absolute honour to have you both on the programme. And join me again next Saturday, where we'll be discussing more politics. This has been Curtis Hinton on InFocus for Quews News.